Welcome to Mpowered Living. I'm Ann Sheu. On this podcast, innovative leaders and visionary experts share insights and practical tools for work, family, and marriage. Each episode, we'll explore how to elevate your life while staying grounded in what truly matters to you. You're working hard to navigate relationships, build a thriving family, and create a legacy of purpose. We're here to help you do that with confidence and intentionality. So if you're ready to live a life by design, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Welcome back to Mpowered Living, the podcast where we explore the habits and conversations that help us build more intentional, resilient lives. I'm your host, Ann Sheu, and today we're diving into one of the biggest questions we face in work and in life. What's next? And how do we design it with purpose? My guests today are Eliot Wajskol and Ann Sheu, co-founders of 50pages, a personal strategy program designed to help high performers design the next chapter of their life with clarity, intention, and community. As life partners and as business partners, Eliot and Anna bring a grounded, heart-forward approach to transitions, whether it's selling a business, becoming an empty nester, or reimagining your purpose. In this episode, we talk about how to approach those big life transitions with clarity, the mindset shifts and support systems that help rewire self-limiting beliefs, and a 6-part framework to design your next chapter with purpose and connection. This conversation is full of real talk, practical tools, and deep wisdom, especially if you're standing at a crossroads and wondering what's next. Let's dive in. Hi, Anna and Eliot. So great to have you guys here today.
Thank you. Hello.
Hello. Thank you.
All right, let's just dive in because I have so much I want to talk to you guys about. So I know you guys have been building 50pages. I would love for you guys to just share a little bit about the 50pages philosophy and why it is so important for people to be doing this work.
Anna, do you want to take it?
No, you start. I'll follow. I know we're going to be in this mode. We're not going to know who's going to speak first. So let's go.
So 50pages is really born of the recognition that and belief that we all have an opportunity to build life, to create our lives by design. If we don't build our lives and create lives by design, it becomes a default life for too many of us. And in life, in business, for those of us who are entrepreneurs, we spend so much time and energy building strategies, building plans, making sure that we don't leave our businesses to default. But in our lives, we oftentimes lack the tools and disciplines to do the same for the thing that really matters. That's where 50pages comes from. That's the starting point.
I love that. Anything you want to add on?
Yeah, I think that that's the starting point. But a lot of times the way we perceive life too is that there is we go through different phases and there's changes and there's new chapters. And what 50pages comes in the forefront is to help people design what's next for them. And I think that the important part is that, as Eliot mentioned, we all have the opportunity to design what's on the other side of transition, of what change, of whatever that is. But a lot of us don't do that. We just accept that we go through different phases. We go through our kids are little and then they grow and then they leave the nest and we retire, we sell companies, we buy companies. There's a different set of circumstances that happen and we just react to whatever is on the other side. And we came in to think, okay, if you know that you are going to go through a change and you are ready for a change or whatever that is that you want to do, why not create and design the way you want that other side to be? That's where we are trying to bring this awareness.
I love that. So if somebody is about to enter transition, what do you guys advise as the first place to start? What's the first thing that they need to do?
What I think so often is missing when people enter into that transition is one, oftentimes there's just a lot of noise. Being able to have a disciplined approach that actually starts with what's even possible. Because I think what we oftentimes do is we slot into a default approach. We take the next step without necessarily thinking about the possibilities. Being able to have an approach where you first start with saying what even is possible. Let me take it even beyond just an immediate challenge, job change, et cetera. But being able to have a platform where you're able to say, where could life even be? What could life look like? If I think about myself and how we think about what we do, who we connect with, how we be mentally, emotionally, physically, the connections we have, the relationships we have, the work, the way we spend time, etc. And not just to think about what are the trappings, but how would I love life to feel as well as what we have? And how do I want to show up in the world? That oftentimes is something we just don't do enough of, is being able to envision what's even possible. Then we can always put the plans together for those of us who are high performers. That's a starting point.
Can I add to that, Anne?
Yes, please.
Okay. I think it depends where you are in the transition bubble, really. There are different places to be when you're in transition, right? So you could be contemplating a transition. You can be curious about what a transition would look like. You know that might be something out there that's new for you, but you're not really sure. And in that case, exploring the possibilities is definitely the starting point. What's possible for me? I'm not there yet, but what's possible? I may be ready for a transition. I'm done with this, whatever it is that's happening in my life. And in that case, the transition, what you're going to focus on is, what do I want to be that's different than what I have now, right? 'Cause it's great to know what you have that you don't like so you can create the contrast of what you like. So that is what it is. Or you can be in a situation where you know a change is going to happen, a transition is going to happen at some point in your life. Like, I know I'm going to be an empty nester someday. I know I'm going to retire someday. I'm not there yet. But what would that look like? So that's a different approach. So I guess it depends on where you are in that transition. And that is going to prompt on what you're going to look on the other side. But in any case, I think what I was mentioning is the fact that we need to be able to envision what's possible first. So that awareness that you can actually create something different is the starting point, is knowing and believing that there is something out there that you can pursue. Unless you have that mindset, you can even start, looking for something different. Does it make
Yeah.
sense?
Yep. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yep. And we talk about awareness a lot in our program as well, right? Without the awareness, you can't
Yes.
do anything. So let's say somebody has the awareness. They
Mm-hmm.
know that they want to imagine something different for the next phase. What then?
What I love people to think about are 5 more things. The what then is, if I can begin to envision what's truly possible, one of the biggest things that holds us back from creating that world that we can create is our own beliefs, our own self-limiting beliefs. So number 2 is really that ability to say, what are my self-limiting beliefs? To be able to put a pin on it, and even better, to be able to say, what would the world look like if those weren't my self-limiting beliefs? Because at the end of the day, they're not real more often than not. We've wired our own brains to follow a certain pattern. Those are the self-limiting beliefs. But if we can rewire brains to say, what's the opposite of that? That then opens up 2 doors. One, it actually reinforces or reinforms what I can even envision as being possible, because now I can play a whole different game. And 2, it allows us just to create that. So that would be a second step, is beginning to play with self-limiting beliefs. Before I go to number 3, any thoughts there?
No, I agree with you. I think that there are things that hold us back from actually moving forward with what we think we could do.
Yeah. Can you guys give us some examples? Like if somebody's listening and they're like, I probably have some, but they're
Yeah.
having a hard time pinpointing what those are exactly. What are some popular examples of self-limiting beliefs that you guys have?
Um, I can throw up a lot of them. Actually, I'll start with a few. But sometimes, just yesterday, I was talking to a woman who had been in her job for 34 years, and she knew it was time for a change. And the voice in her head, you're going to leave this. This is safe. This is secure. Where are you going to go? So the self-limiting beliefs, the fear, the stories we tell ourselves of what we can or we can't do, what society, so social conditioning is a huge, it stops everything. And community, she was telling me how her mother was telling her she was crazy and she didn't want to disappoint her mother, right? So a lot of times the community that you're in can support you or not. It can hold you back because you don't want to disappoint them. So those are things that can happen. Or sometimes you envision something and then you say, well, but I'm not able to do that. Who am I to think that I could do it? Who am I to think that I can be that person? So those are the self-limiting beliefs that Eliot is mentioning, is that we have these stories in our heads, am I able to do it? Do I have what it takes? And then if you don't have the community that supports that, then it's a double whammy that holds you back. Does that give you an idea?
Yeah, I feel like Everybody struggled with that, right? Do I have what it takes? Can I do this?
And one of the things we play with within the 50 pages model, and I know we wanted to talk about the third point of community, but one of the things we've played with is we developed a map of about 70 self-limiting beliefs
Mm.
in 7 different categories, just to help people even put a pin on it and identify it. And the beauty is flipping it. So 2 crystallizing examples. For so many people, I'll pick an example that's salient for me back in the past. I don't even belong in this room. Who am I to be here? Why am I in this room? And what am I even going to say? Let me just shrink back to the corner. Well, if I begin to envision the possible, I I can't play that way. I don't want to play that way. I'm done with it. The flip side is, what if I can envision a world or a belief that says, I belong in this room? Not only do I belong in this room, people appreciate me because I
Mm.
connect them to themselves and I connect them to others. That's a flip of a self-limiting belief. And now you can bake that into envisioning what's possible. So that's a little bit of what we play with when it comes to the self-limiting beliefs.
So it sounds so easy to just say, this is what the self-limiting belief is that you have, and you should flip it to this. But how does somebody actually go about rewiring their brain and their beliefs so that they actually believe that they belong there and they add value to that room?
Funny because all these questions that you're asking, it's interesting if Elliot and I even agree on the answer, right? Like now we're going. It feels like one of those like TV shows where you put the two people and they're like, are they answering the same thing? Do you know what I like? Don't I like? You don't know I don't like ice cream. I don't want mine. It's a little bit like that, but. I always believe that whenever you call it, so there's something in therapy that's called naming, right? The minute that you name something, it's when you're aware. Once you're aware, you can flip it. You cannot flip something that you're not aware of. The minute that you know that you have a self-limiting belief. So in this case, I'm not good enough to be in this room. The minute you know that that's what you're feeling, then you can start to think about what would it feel like if I felt like I belonged in this room. And once you start to let your body feel what that contrast would be like, that's when you start to flip. You can't really flip it unless you know what that contrast feels like. And that's, I think, one of the things. So naming it, understanding what's going on, it doesn't matter if it's bad. A lot of times we have a hard time recognizing I am afraid. This is fear talking. But every time we name it, we are able to flip it.
Mm.
But I don't know if Elliot has something similar or different. We're going to find out right now. Elliot.
Absolutely. And I think that there's 2 parts to it, which is that if your why is big enough, you're willing to invest the time and energy to do exactly what Anna just said. That's why starting with envisioning what's even possible is important, because that sets a stage. If your why, if what you envision is big enough, if you're hungry enough for it, it creates a why. And then it's worth investing the time, the energy to name that self-limiting belief and to feel into it and to do something different about it. And the third part that we've really focused on when we're with 50 pages is community. And that helps reinforce as well to get to I think what you're suggesting, which is the more that we surround ourselves, we are going to be defined by the 5, the 10, the 15 people that we're around. Sociology tells us that rates of obesity are informed by the communities that we're in. Smoking or any type of behavior, or the positive exercise, rates of exercise are informed by the people that we're in. It's really subtle what happens, but we simply absorb who we're around. And so to the extent that the third component that we really focus on is creating our community with intent. And so that to the extent that we're conscious about who we surround ourselves with, to the extent that we are clear about the behaviors of the people that we love spending time with and the behaviors of those who are just energy vampires and drain us. Great. If the more clear we are on the types of people we want to spend time and energy with, the more that we will find ways of spending more time and energy with them. And there's one other tool actually that we use with those people, those who are in 50 pages, which is really thinking consciously about who's my surround sound team. What are the archetypes of the people that I really want to be around in order to get to that future? An example of an archetype is a mentor and a coach. They don't have to know that that's who they are, but who's out there that I look to that will help lead the way? the truth teller. We all need to have a truth teller, someone that's just going to hit us with a 2x4 every now and then. And we love it. We appreciate it because they're doing that for us. The cheerleader. We need to have a ride or die in our lives who will support us. 7 different archetypes that we've defined. But as we think consciously about, are we surrounding ourselves with the types of people that will get us to the future? Not only does that help us that helps inform that future that we could live, because we're going to get brilliant ideas from other people. We're going to get excited about the pace setters that are ahead of us and what they're doing. But that also gives us an anchor as we want to challenge our self-limiting beliefs and flip them. If we're surrounded by the people that will help us on that journey, it makes it that much easier as well.
Yeah. So is it your philosophy that we should make sure to have at least one of each archetype in our inner circle?
I believe you don't have to, and they don't have to be different people at all times. But one of the most beautiful exercises one can go through is to take a look at each of those archetypes and say, where do I have gaps? Because at times I may not need to have someone hit me with a 2x4. Great, they're out there. I don't need a truth teller today. But if I am at that point in time where I really should, and there's a gap there,
Yeah.
that's where it's important to be really conscious of making sure that ultimately I have a stable of people around me that can fill all of those archetypes.
Yeah. And you think that there's certain people that could be in several of the different archetypes for you? Or is it one
If I could be
person?
really personal, on any time, I know that Anna can always be a truth teller and a cheerleader for me at any point in time. She's in at least 2 different seats, as an example.
I'm a huge truth teller. Yeah.
Okay, so how do people fill the gaps if they realize that there's a gap in their community, in their inner circle?
I think that what's important again is the awareness, right? Once you understand the archetypes,
Yeah.
and you start it was actually one for me when I went to the program, which I did before I became a co-founder of the company. It was one of the most enlightening exercises I had done. I had no idea what I was missing and who was who. So just that awareness, what happens is once you start to cultivate your relationships, you start to see them with different eyes and see who is who, including the people who don't necessarily bring you the best energy. You start to, and then you start being a little bit more selective with who you spend your time with. But if you are missing somebody, it's not, it's not like you're going to go on the street and say, hey, do you want to be my cheerleader? It's not going to be that way. But if you notice that that person is, or if you notice that person has the ability to be a truth teller, then you start, cultivating the relationship and then finding a way to actually bring that out of that person, if that doesn't make sense. Yeah. Yeah.
So then what comes after community?
Behaviors, habits and behaviors. One of the things I think that if you're listening to this podcast, I'm sure you have a phenomenal behavior stack and a phenomenal habit stack, and you've listened to James Clear, and you know that life is about systems, etc.
Yep. Yep.
But I believe that there's a couple of parts to it, which is that as we begin to envision what's possible, as we start challenging our self-limiting behaviors and defining how we want to show up in the world, as we think critically about the community of people we have around ourselves, we're creating a flywheel there. One of the beautiful opportunities is to really look critically at saying, okay, now let me take a look at the habits and behaviors I've got in place. I've probably got a wonderful stack, but what else do I need? I'll give an example. I know that it's really important for me to work out on a regular basis. That's just to keep my mind clear. To meditate on a regular basis. That's just so I can show up in the world and not look wonky. Those are there. But as I think about the world and how I want to show up in the world, if I'm really envisioning the way that I'd like to, I now recognize that those were occasional things. But now I really need to lean in on them at a different level. So being conscious of the behaviors that you have today, defining what are the behaviors and habits that I need to have in the future. Within there, I think another really important behavior or habit is presence. If I'm not really here, if I'm living in the past and I'm living in I'm living in the future, and I'm not really here, it's really hard to shape that future that I want to. And the last is having the ability to recognize and acknowledge where I am today. And if I'm up against something, very quickly shift from problem-centered thinking to solution-focused thinking, which is out there. 3 really critical behaviors and habits that are out there: being conscious of where you are, designing those intentionally, being present, and defining habits and behaviors to actually show up and be here, be now. And then being able to shift from problem-centered thinking that'll just pull you down into solution-focused thinking that'll move you forward. are a few of the behaviors and habits that we really focus on.
That's good. So, what does auditing your current behaviors list look like? And then how do you know what the right ones are for the future?
So we actually take people through a process of exactly that, just sitting down and doing exactly what you just said, which is sometimes we don't even recognize that we have a set of behaviors and habits, and they're great, they're strong. And really going through exactly that process of just asking a few questions. Number one, what do I have today that's really strong? Number two, do I have any behaviors or habits that are maybe a little bit outdated or not serving myself? Number three, if I'm envisioning a future, as I'm starting to get more crystal clear on what that looks like, what could I put in place? Because there's no lack of ideas. I think we've all heard every podcast, every book, we've talked to our therapists, we've talked to our life coaches, we've got the resources out there. What we simply haven't done is taken that moment to codify what's out there. And then the last one is two other questions. Where do I get pulled back into old behaviors or outdated ways of thinking? And as I look at that habit behavior stack, anything that I should be reinforcing. And then finally, what do I need to do more of? And what do I need to do less of?
Yeah.
I want to clarify that has to be based on what you're trying to accomplish, because the 5 a.m. club is not for everybody, right? That's a behavior set that a lot of people think is great. Love those people who do that. And that's not for me, right? I'm not that kind of person. And so it's important to stay away from, it worked for Eliot. He wakes up at 5. I don't.
Yeah.
And if I don't, and I'm okay with it, because if I do, I'm not a good person, right? So it's important to know that individuality of your own habits and behaviors, understand why you do certain things, and not self-judge and say, oh, my habit of waking up a certain time is bad, his is better. It's about understanding where I am. Does waking up at a certain time hinders my goal to reach to whatever I want to reach? And if it doesn't, you stay. If it does, then you're going to consider changing it. So I think that's the part that we have to take people through, is this piece of what's right for me, which is why the program is we emphasize a lot. This is what's right for you, what matters to you, what's on your terms, because what's good for me might not be good for him or for somebody else. And in particular, women, right? I mean, a lot of things are tested on men. And then all of a sudden, women want to do intermittent fasting for 16 hours. And that's why their hormones are all over the place. Nobody talks about that. So I think there's a lot of understanding that piece of habits and behaviors that are tailored to you and what you are trying to accomplish. So that's what the program does, is taking us there.
So I love these two examples because it really helps me understand what you mean by like really figure out what works for you and what needs to change and what doesn't need to change. So you mentioned the 5 a.m. club and the intermittent fasting. Can you give some other examples where you see people making behavior or habit changes based on what they see other people doing and they think is good, and it actually might not be the right thing for them? Like,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah.
I will give you one example that encompasses everything. It's called the influencer world, right? That's what it is. It covers everything. If you worked for Kim Kardashian, I'm gonna do it. If this is very prominent in the business world, in particular with leadership teams. When I became a CEO, being one of a few women that are out there, like all the books are written by men. So women in that capacity will read books that are written by men and say, oh, if, they did this, I should be doing this. If they're waking up at 5, I should be waking up at 5. If Jeff Bezos doesn't look at his phone for an hour, I shouldn't be looking for it. So there is a lot of habits and behaviors that are promoted by the people who are successful. And if I admire somebody, I tend to do what they're doing, think it's going to work for me. So the influencer world today is a big thing, right? If they love it, if it works for them, if that concealer works for them, it works for me. If that lipstick, so it's all over. That happens a lot with habits as well. For some people, just yesterday, this woman said, I wake up and I have, glass of water with lemon every day. Well, that's good for some people. For some other people, it's not healthy. So we have to know what works for us on the behavior side, right? What makes me be the person I want to be, and how It makes me show up at my best and then know which behaviors work for me versus not.
So, do
Yeah.
you think that that awareness of what works and doesn't work comes through some sort of analysis assessment on the front end, or do you think it comes from testing it and getting the feedback and figuring out, like, doing the evaluation on the back end?
You want to take it? Yeah.
I think it's both. And one of the things I love about frameworks, they're just ways of looking at the world. They're ways of just seeing the world. And so as we're describing the framework that we work through and helping people design their next chapter, it's not one and done. It's iterative. It's really just a matter of getting stronger at each of those components. And so if I just envisioning the possible, building belief, creating community, shaping behaviors and habits, as I think about it, those are just ways of looking at the world that if I get stronger in each of those components, there's just two more that we talk about. But as I get stronger in each component, I have the opportunity to design my life, to build, to write my next chapter by intent. And so to your question, I think it's both. The worst thing in the world is just sitting thinking about things. We can only begin to shape things by putting things into action and testing them. And I think of everything as a hypothesis. Let me try it out. And so it's both. I think that this behavior might make a lot of sense. I think this habit might make a lot of sense. Let me do it. Let's put this into action and then let's learn from it. The challenge is I try something and I abandon it. It's really about building the recognition that stacking habits and stacking rituals and stacking behaviors does make a difference. But over time, we'll figure out which one works for you.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. And again, the 5 a.m. club, it doesn't mean that you won't try it, but there is that piece that we were talking earlier about the know thyself, and you're right, like you need to know thyself. If you wake up at 5 a.m. and it doesn't work, you change and try something else. But I do agree with Elliot. You have to do a little bit of iterate. There had to be iterations. You're not going to know what's going to work until we actually give it a shot. But then you need to know how it works for you.
Yeah. How long do you think people should try it for before they abandon it? Like, where's the balance between like trying it long enough and like powering through the hard and doing something new, and then understanding where the line is, like, hey, this is not working for me, or is it just still really hard because it's a new thing?
Do you want the scientific piece or do you want the fluffy piece? I can give you all of it. So this common knowledge that it takes 21 days. You know, you put in the bracelet and you change. There's a whole thing. But there is a piece that I learned on the brain that actually, that what happens is it takes some time for you to start taking a habit. And then there is a moment that you peak and a moment that you actually feel worse
Mm.
than before. But if you're able to pass that, if you're able to just kind of get just a little more, that's when it flips. And most people don't like it. It's called embrace the suck. I don't know if you've heard of that term before. It's being out there right now a lot. You hear that from everyone, but embrace the suck means you do have to give yourself some time. It's going to feel a little worse. Actually, there is an author we love, Graham Weaver, that says, whatever you want is on the other side of worse first. It's a great
Mm.
quote. Whatever you want is on the other side of worse first. You need to be okay with not feeling that like you're not going anywhere and then pushing through. And then you will feel the difference. And that is more of a little bit of what's been more scientific. But 21 days works too. So we could do both.
I love
It's
that.
easy. Just count it.
So, well, now I'm just thinking about things that I've probably abandoned before 21 days because it was sucky. And
I don't know. I've never done the 21 days, but I try to embrace the suck a lot. I'm thinking this is going to happen.
all right, Elliot, you said there's two more. So, what's the next one?
The next one is really around having the tools and disciplines to begin to align your life and activate the change. Three that we introduce. Four, define your ideal day, define your ideal week. Number three, define your ideal year or your upcoming 12 months. And finally, what's your personal scorecard? What happens so often is that we don't have the tools that define the way that we live every day. And so by defining your ideal day, I'll just give an example of what that can look like when we work with teams on that. If I lived a default life, my natural default is to do things out of obligation. Spent years doing that, at least in my own mind. When I took a step back and by the way, that's between work, family, kids. For so many of us, we come last. We've got companies to run, families to run, etc. My ideal day looked to me like the most selfish thing I could ever imagine. It was a hurdle for me to actually define what an ideal day looks like. It takes 3 hours before I even show up and do anything. My ideal day, I'd wake up in the morning. I am part of that
Yes.
5 a.m. club. My ideal day, I wake up in the morning. I need to brush my teeth, and then I got to go work out because I love going for that morning workout. I should probably shower up when I'm done and when I'm back. I'd love to meditate. I'd love to read a chapter in a book. I'd love to do a little bit of writing. I should probably have some breakfast. I need to prep for the day and see what's going on, and then attend to whatever's happening with family, etc. By the time I'm done with that, that's a 3 hour chunk. It looked like the most selfish thing in the world. But two things when I actually put it down. One is I recognize I actually need those things in order to show up right in the world. That the
Mhm.
best way I can serve those people who I love or do the things I want to do to create meaning and purpose is by investing that time and energy in the day. Now, my day does not look like that more often than not, but by defining my ideal, I actually have a shot at living my ideal and showing up right. And if I don't, I know where I need to emphasize and what I need to do. So that's like defining the ideal day. Defining an ideal week is really just recognizing we all have a rhythm in how we move. Now I know, and I did not recognize it, my ideal rhythm, and again, I don't live my ideal week every week, but my ideal rhythm is really a Monday that's really focused on internal stuff, team stuff, all the things you have to get after. And my ideal week would end with the Friday that doesn't go all the way until the end. In between Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, throw it at me. I can go 24/7 on that, doing other things. And then can I just not work on a Saturday, Sunday and truly unplug? That's my ideal week. And if I can't define what that looks like, then I can't get toward it. And whether or not today I might not be doing it, but I know that's what I'm trying to architect. An ideal year, Jesse Itzler really helped
Yeah.
me see what that could look like. And of course, we've played around with it. So we've made our own version of what that looks like. But there's such an important principle that he put out there, which is our lives go by and we don't even notice the years. They just blur. We're in the middle of it. But if you ask me to look back at the last 5 years, it's so easy. And I've been there of having periods of time. They just went. The idea of being able to define what your ideal year looks like really is about saying, what does this year stand for? What is this year going to be all about? I love going even further and saying, well, I would love to do a mental challenge, a physical challenge, a spiritual challenge. What do I want to do to push myself for that year? I'd love to be able to define up front what are the tentpole activities that I'm going to have in my life. A friend of ours, Scott Rusnak, introduced me to that concept of just being able to upfront say, what are the blocks of time that I'm going to block out? And they're going to be big and meaningful because it's so easy for our lives to get absorbed. What are the blocks of time that we're going to have that we're going to do something big and meaningful and block that out a year in advance because otherwise those just go away. And there's other ways to play with what an ideal year looks like. And finally, having a personal scorecard. Sometimes we measure way too much, but what are the few things that if I kept track of those, I know whether I'm on track or off track in how I show up in the world. So those 4 tools are really about, and there's more, but it's really about taking idea and starting to move it to action so we can design our next chapter and live our next chapter by intent. So that's aligning and activating.
What do you say to the people who are struggling with even thinking about what their ideal day might look like because they're in an unusually busy season of life? Maybe they have a bunch of little kids at home, or they're in the midst of like early stage building career and they're just pouring a ton of time and energy into like these people that are like, yeah, that sounds amazing. I would love to, build this ideal day and dream it up. But if I do that, like I can't even imagine that. And if I were to do it, it just makes me feel really crappy about the day that I actually have because it's not realistic. It's so far from reality.
Um, can I offer something here? I've been there. Right? I had to build a company. I had little kids, and I had that. And looking back after doing this exercise, what I realized was it wasn't that I was consumed and not consumed. And one thing I learned from reading that book called The One Thing is that there's no such a thing as balance, right? There's no such a thing as balance. Balance means it's equal time to everything. It's that depending where you are in your life, you are going to give more attention to certain things and not others. And maybe when you're building your company, there will be a more time and attention given to the business, but it doesn't mean that we can't try to map out how the other parts of your life are going to take some effort and attention as well. And I think that goes back to what Eliot said about the week, right? So yes, I know I'm going to have to work a lot, but I am going to make a point to shut down my email at 8 o'clock at night and spend time with my kids. And that's the time that is uninterrupted, and you just honor it. And so when you start to create these things in your week and you honor those times, I think you start feeling a lot better, because now you know that you're honoring all these areas of your life, like your health part, your family, your relationships, and your business. Does that make sense? It's not about you have to only work this and you can't work that. It's about, at this point in my life, I have to give more attention to this, and I'm going to go a little bit less attention to my friends, and I'm going to give good attention for my family. But maybe in 6 months that changes, that ratio can change for a bit.
Mm-hmm. What was the last one, Eliot?
Make it happen. Number 6, make it happen is really just about bringing it to the ground and taking action, because the worst thing in the world is that we sit and we dream, but we don't do. And so make it happen is a set of tools. What exactly is our future picture? Can we crystallize it in every dimension? 3 years out, as an example. 1 year from now, what are the few things we've got to do over the next 12 months? And then as we do in the business world over the next 90 days, what are the few things we're going to do? But crystallizing it into action. One of the beautiful things, if someone has a partner in life, is to be able to build that 3-year picture together. I can tell you that, in case folks haven't gleaned, if they're listening, Ann and I are both business partners and personal partners, or actually life partners and business partners. The exercise of going through a 3-year picture can be the most eye-opening exercise, to be able to say we are aligned or we're not aligned on what it is we want to create. That picture is, and if we've gone through that process of envisioning what's possible, challenging self-limiting beliefs, thinking critically about community, thinking about our behaviors and habits, thinking about what our ideal day, our ideal week, our ideal year is, those elements inform what a 3-year picture can look like. And that's such a powerful tool that so often we don't do ourselves individually or as couples. The risk is you feel like it's window shopping. Oh my gosh, why should I even dream about this? Because I'm not going to have it anyway. But the flip side is, if I can't see crystal clear what we want to create, how are we ever going to get there? And then we just pull it in a little bit closer. Just a couple things. What do we need to accomplish over the next 12 months? What do we want to accomplish? Is we so often say less is more, and then over the next 90 days. But that's really about making it happen. And then when folks are working with within the 50 pages construct, we then have the opportunity to come together every 90 days and then just revisit. So it becomes evergreen. All of this becomes evergreen, and we keep working toward making it actionable.
Yeah. So you hinted towards this, or not even hinted, but I want to hear a little bit more about your how you guys have navigated your personal relationship and your working relationship, and how do you guys set some, if any, what boundaries do you guys set, and how do you navigate those two dynamics in a way that they don't monopolize or cannibalize each other?
Well, first of all, we live in different coasts, so that starts right there. So you go, one lives in Miami, the other one lives in Portland. That starts right there. No, I think what happened is, before we even went into business, I never thought I would ever be able to work with a partner. So with Elliot was different. But when we went into this journey together, uh, we were very, very intentional about how we would make sure that we would have regular check-ins, right? That was very important. And then Elliot had a set of 4 questions that we would ask, that we actually currently still ask each other, to make sure that we are aligned still, right? To make sure that our relationship comes first. I mean, obviously we want to do this, but our relationship comes first. And I think that in particular this last week, which we had it was a real push to get some things published and everything else, that concept of there's no balance, right? This last week, we were definitely a lot more into the business and not as much into personal. There are some weeks that we are a lot more into personal than we're in business, but regardless, there like last night, we were like, we're not talking about work. I don't care what happens. We're not talking about work. And so you do have to set boundaries, because it's very easy to blur the edges, and it's midnight and you have an idea and you want to say, oh, I just had an idea. And we both love what we do, right? The passion comes through. So because of that, it's exciting, right? It's exciting for me to be at dinner and see something and like, this is an inspiration, but then sort of lose sight. But I think we do a pretty good job, right, Elliot?
And I think we're not perfect. I think the other part is, I think we have a framework. We live by the framework that we
We
share.
do. We do.
And the beauty of that is that no one, well, I'm sure someone's out there who's perfect. We're not one of them. But having a framework, having a way of looking at the world that's common, and having a set of tools and disciplines really helps us stay true to what we're doing.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I'm dying to know, what are those 4 questions?
So number one, actually, there's a 5th question that we sneak in. But the 4 questions that were really on the business side are: is our relationship better off if we're working together than not working together? And that really was it. We didn't want it to be neutral or worse, but is our relationship, our personal relationship, better off as if we're working together? The second is this are these crazy ideas even viable? Do we still feel like this insane? Because everything is a bet, everything's a project. Is it still viable? The third is, are we having fun doing the work
Mm-hmm.
itself? Are we enjoying doing the work? And the last is, can we go twice as fast together and twice as big in terms of making an impact? Can we do that twice as strongly together versus apart? So those are the 4 questions. And the last is, how are we doing together from a 1 to a 10?
Yeah, we did that a lot. We did that a lot. Also, for us being bi-coastal, I think working together. So that first question is actually pretty relevant for us, because we do live in different states, so we get to see each other more during the day, doing meetings, and then we keep it business, and then on the beginning of the day, end of the day is pretty much just personal. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
What
works well.
tips were you guys together before you started the business?
Yes, we were. Yeah, it's a complicated story.
So, so
But
in,
we were together, but we had known each other for a long time before we get together, and then we were together. Yes.
okay. So, what tips would you have for couples that have been together for a while and they're deciding to start a business together?
I think a couple of I'll start. I'll start. You'll keep going.
It's
I think
okay.
it's
Keep
being
going. Yeah.
intentional. I really think that being intentional is an important part of it. It's easy to slip into something, and I think the worst thing in the world is you wake up one day and things are rough on the business side and your personal side suffers. Things are rough on the personal side and the business side suffers. And so I do think that there's an element of it that's really about being intentional. Are we conscious going into this thing so we're not slipping into it? I think that there's a second component of making sure that we're taking care of the relationship, because that's why we got together in the first place, is a personal relationship. And so making sure that we take the time and the energy to attend to that, because I can't think of a more complex, and you and I work with family businesses, Anna does as well. And I think that there is nothing more complicated than having a business where you have a personal relationship and a business relationship. If you're just business in that world, it's pure to some extent, because we're not family in a business. We're here to take care of business. But when you're family and business, it's a whole different thing. So I think that making sure that you take the time, or one takes the time and energy to take care of the personal side, even if it's as simple as being conscious. Let's go out on a date. Let's make sure we block out time. Let's make sure we take the time to not talk about business. Let's make sure we talk about ourselves. But those are 2 of, I think, of the really big parts that, to me, I think are important if someone's embarking on both.
See, that's why I love him, because he's so like, he's looking at that, and it's just my heart, like right now, is just beating very fast. But it's not that. See, for me, it's more like I go on a pragmatic approach, which is recognizing as a partnership. I think it's very important to know what our strengths lie.
Mm,
And then once we determine that, and I say, like, for example, I own the numbers. I'm the one we have different strengths. Although we're very similar, we could tell we both talk a lot, and it's very hard to, who talks first. We have to have timers, it's time is up, my time. Like, we talk a lot, but we do have different skill sets. So if I am in charge of this and he's in charge of that, you just have to recognize that and then trust that other person is going to take care of that and not second guess or not try to say, hey, you're doing it wrong, because that is what damages it a little bit. Is that if if I know it's my area of expertise and I'm doing my financials and all that, and he comes to me and says, that line item should be wrong, I'm going to go like, what are you talking about? So then it becomes a little bit friction, right? So I think that's important. I think that's a key. But then there is going to be moments where you have to work together. And when that happens, then a tip is please know that that other person is not always going to see the way you see it. And you have to take an exhale and be okay with it. Because sometimes, especially for both of us, from our backgrounds being business founders and leadership teams and all that, we have strong opinions. I think mine's right. He thinks his is right. And then all of a sudden we're going. So I think recognizing that it's a leadership team, no matter if it's your partner, it's still a leadership team. How would you work with your COO or your CFO or your CEO? How would you do that if you're in the boardroom? That's the same approach you take when you're with your partner. I think that's a key thing, is you treat that as a C-suite and you act the same. And it's the same level of respect for their skill set, for what they bring to the table. You don't make all the decisions alone. You have to do it all as if this is, you know what I mean? Even though we call each other love and babe as we have meetings, it still has to be, very much of a form. There is a formality to it. And Elliot is really good. Like, we run formal meetings and, and I love to digress, as you could probably tell. So we have this thing where he doesn't want me to digress and I want to digress. So I said, okay, well, let's not digress for 90 minutes and then give me 10 minutes to just flow out and then do what I need to do. So we came to a compromise. So compromising is a very important part, but from a professional perspective, when you don't feel like you can come up to
What happens, like, who's your tiebreaker? If you guys are just stuck and completely, at odds, what do you guys do?
Dude, have we
I
had
don't
one of
think we
those?
have it, but there's a reason that I think we haven't had a true tiebreaker, which is I think that there is a principle that we're operating on, and Jeff Bezos has he was talking one time, or there's a YouTube that's out there, and he talks about that he's worked with leaders for 20 plus years. He knows them, he trusts their judgment. He has a strong opinion, they have a strong opinion, but compromise sometimes, that milk toast going down the middle, kills great things. And at times he just simply says, and the phrase that he has is, we agree to disagree.
Mm,
Go do your thing. I commit to doing it. I
yeah.
agree to disagree. Go do it. And so I think that that's the approach that we take, because there's very little that we're doing that you really have to die on the hill about. We have opinions, we have perspectives, and then we can agree to disagree. The big thing is we talk it out, we hash it out. And I think one of the core principles, and we talk about this so much, is open and honest. Let's make sure we're open and honest. We say our piece. If we're open and honest, we're not going to have resentments later on the professional side or the personal side. And that's what we practice. And so there really isn't anything that we get stuck on yet, because I don't think that either there's anything that big that we have to die on the hill about, and we can agree to disagree.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. Anything you want to add on
Yeah.
that, Anna?
No, I agree with everything he said. I think a lot of times it's important to differentiate the content of the disagreement versus the format on how it's being discussed. It is a very different way. So sometimes we may disagree on the actual content, and sometimes we may disagree on how we are discussing it. And the latter usually happens more often, I think, between men and women, because we have different ways of processing information, right? So he's a lot more like, let's go pragmatic, and I'm like flowing, I'm going this way. And it's okay. I think that as long as we recognize that that's a fundamental difference of how he processes versus how I process, and then because of that, we will have some sort of a disagreement. It is not necessary. And sometimes he says this, we're violently agree. What'd you say? You say something, we're violently agreeing on this. We're just saying it differently. I'm like, no kidding. We're saying it differently. Yeah. You know what I mean? So we are saying the same thing in different ways. That is key when you are with your partner, because when you are with somebody that's not related to you, you're a lot more open to take someone else's approach in a different way. But with your partner, you're like, how can you not communicate the way I do? So it's that is a nuance there. So I always try to to think about that. How would it be if he were not my partner? And if he said that, how would I have taken that differently? I really am conscious about that. He might not think I am, but I am. I promise I am.
People have been listening and they want to learn more about 50 Pages and the work that you guys are doing. What's the best way for them to find out more, to get in touch with you guys?
The easiest way is go to 50pages.life. So the word is spelled out, FIFTY pages.life.
Or LinkedIn with us. Come and find us on LinkedIn. We're there.
Great.
We're there a lot. Yeah.
And we'll drop those links into the show notes as well.
Yes, absolutely.
We appreciate it because when you said the easiest way, anyone who's trying to spell my last name will not find it. But if it's in the show notes, they'll find it.
Exactly. There
We'll
we
drop those
Yes.
into the show notes. It's been such a pleasure chatting with you guys today. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
So excited to continue watching the impact that Life Pages is going to have, 50 Pages is going to have on so many lives. So looking forward to watching that journey and seeing how
Yes.
it unfolds.
Thank
you.
you. This was a lot of fun.
Yes, thank you for the great questions. Thanks for the opportunity just to
Yeah,
speak
it
with
was a
your
lot of fun.
audience. And I think for both of us, it's just fun that really we're in the same pool together. The work that you're
Yeah.
doing with Empowered Families, the work we're doing with 50 Pages and helping people design life by intent, write their next life chapters. We're swimming in the same pool. And so really appreciate the opportunity to chat.
Love that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Empowered Living. I hope today's conversation sparked some inspiration and gave you tools to live more intentionally in your family, work, and life. If you enjoyed our episode today, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an inspiring story or actionable takeaway. And if you know someone who would love this episode, share it with them, because living an intentional life is better when we do it together. Until next time, remember, the life you want doesn't happen by chance. It happens by choice. Let's keep creating it one step at a time.